Joining me on the Knicks Film School podcast is a guest who needs no introduction, but we're going to do it anyway.
I need one. You're right.
I think it's worthwhile. He hosts multiple podcasts, Big Blue Kickoff Live, Giants Huddle podcast, both of those for the New York Football Giants, I should add, and Bank Shot Knicks podcast. And now that's shot with an O, not an I.
Well done.
He's a wonderful person. We had to get someone named John to, while Jonathan Macri is out, but this one starts with an H, as in, of course, HJON. Jonathan Schmeelk. John Schmeelk, how are you doing, man?
I'm great, and that is the only proper way to spell John, by the way, just for the record.
HJON, of course.
Yeah, of course.
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you so much. First of all, I have to ask, so how did everything go in New England? Obviously, the Giants fell short against the Patriots, but how was the experience?
It was good. We were in Cleveland and New England up there in Providence for like 8 of 10 days. So it was exhausting. It was felt like about 110 degrees up there. It was really hot. I don't know how these guys ran around for 2 hours. I stood there for 2 hours and I felt like I was going to pass out. So it was good. I'm happy to finally get some real games coming up in a couple weeks here. I'm tired of watching practice in preseason. Let's get some real NFL football action going here.
Well, it's great. I mean, I guess that there's an extra NFL regular season game. That's one less preseason game for you to have to cover. One more, exciting game. But we'll get to the Giants, I promise. But first, Knicks podcast figure, might as well talk about the Knicks. And let's start with the Knicks offseason. So, John, I know you and I have talked about this before, but give me your thoughts on the Knicks offseason and where you felt the team's direction is kind of going, how you're confident, maybe not as confident, kind of just general idea about everything going on with all things New York basketball.
I think they did the best they could. Now, that doesn't mean it's like an A+, because I don't think the A+ offseason was realistically available to them. So I think they did great. I mean, the Kemba Walker contract might be the best value of any contract this offseason. He might not be healthy, but at $8 million, I mean, can you really go wrong with the risk? I don't think you can. And you hope between Walker and Rose, you get, maybe they miss 40 games between the two of them. I think that'd probably be a win. So I think you solved, at least temporarily, a big part of your point guard issues, which I think was a big part of this offseason. I think you improved your shooting between the draft and what they did in free agency as well. You lost Reggie Bullock, you lost your defensively, but I think they replaced him well enough with what they did elsewhere. And I think they just set themselves up well for the next move. And I think the important things that Knicks fans have to realize, before last season, I was still on board with get the high draft pick and, try to get your next star that way, because it's hard to, I think it's probably the most feasible way to find one, even though a lot of luck is involved in it. But once Julius Randle took the step that he did, I think we were at the point where that strategy no longer held water, and it just wasn't going to work, because if you have an all-NBA player on your roster and RJ Barrett's going to make the improvement that he did, you were never going to be bad enough to get a good enough pick to get a superstar in the draft, barring some, Klay Thompson, Kawhi Leonard level of luck, which frankly just doesn't happen very often and you can't count on. So with that said, I think the Knicks did the best they could in setting themselves up for what their strategy is now going to be. They're not going to have cap space for 2 years, and that's fine. So they're basically saying we're going to make that next step by trading for a superstar. So I think every move they did this offseason was with that in mind. And the contracts and the way they structured them will allow that to happen. Would I have loved Derrick Rose and Nerlens Noel and Alec Burks on 1-year deals instead of 2-year deals? Sure. But I don't think you could have gotten them on 1-year deals. So again, it goes back to the best offseason that was available to them argument, because I do think you had to balance continuity, because you wanted to, try to build a little bit on what you did last year, but at the same time get better and set yourself up to take that next step, which is acquiring a superstar. And I think for the most part, they balanced those two parts of their offseason as best as they could. And now you just wait for a superstar to get annoyed and ask for a trade. And really, Knicks fans, that's where we're at.
And it seems every single season or off season, there is a superstar who says, you know what, I've had enough. I want to go elsewhere. The fact about with Rose and Burks and Noel, and really any of the guys who maybe the argument could have been with a 1-year contract, knowing what we know now, because at the time, how would we have known it? But considering what the free agency landscape looks like, where you have two phenomenal all-star free agents who are, who will definitely hit the market in Zach LaVine because he's not eligible to even sign a 30% max contract until the offseason anyway. The other in Bradley Beal, who could re-sign for 35% max with the Wizards. And then it's just a lot of the other guys. So, I mean, considering how it's like, TJ Warren, Aaron Gordon, Joe Ingles, that type of tier, are you comfortable with the fact that they have had multiple years, or are you still kind of like, I know that that's the case, but man, you could just create room and do other things with that without having to clog it up with rotation guys?
Yeah, look, I would, if I could get him on 1 year, I would have been fine with that. Then, if you want to re-sign the guys next year, you can. Because I do think it is easier to bring in a star when you don't have to completely match salary and you can absorb some of that into your cap space. I do think that makes things a little bit easier. So, yeah, ideally. But again, I don't think you could have gotten those guys on 1 year deal. So I think we're arguing against a factual that's just not there. So, yeah, I would prefer to be able to absorb him into space. And I think it gives you flexibility to do other things during the season, too, with guys on expiring deals. But given, to your point, next year's free agency landscape, it's really not as big of a deal to me. And with a guy like LaVine, to your point, if he hits the open market, if Beal hits the open market, you can swing sign-in trades for those guys. And the price in those sign-in trades is not going to be high because of obviously the circumstances involved. And those sign-in trade deals, you're never getting commensurate value back anyway. So no, not that big of a deal. Ideally, sure. But again, I don't think that was possible given the landscape.
Agreed. And I think also the fact that those players are under contract for what would really be the 2022 draft. If something were to happen where there's, forgetting obviously LaVine, Beal could be traded if he opted in, but LaVine aside, of course, being able to use the money to make a move. Whereas if it were 1 year deals and it's like, well, we're in a hold, we can't really do anything. So, but I see the logic to that as well. So other than those three contracts, I guess, is there anything that you would have done differently if you were Leon Rose or Brock Aller or whoever wants to be in charge in the case?
Well, I mean, I think maybe you could have done. I think one of the things you brought up in a prior podcast, Jeremy, is the Derek Favors trade where they could have absorbed him and gotten a pick for him. I think that makes a lot of sense. Otherwise, I mean, I think you can argue, it was Fournier the ideal guy. Would you have preferred, to go after one of the other guys that plays a similar position, right? Powell, do you like him better than Fournier? Somebody like that. And that's more of a player preference deal in terms of what you're looking for. The thing about Fournier is I think he's been asked to play a role that he's not suited to in Orlando. And we've seen that in multiple end of game situations actually against the Knicks when they've given him the ball, go run a pick and roll and create something. It doesn't go well for him. And I think we saw that in the Olympics, right? When you played the U.S. in the gold medal game and you said, all right, go get a bucket, and they put their best defender on him, it wasn't happening. And he's forcing up these terrible shots. So the good thing about the Knicks is that he's their third or fourth guy, depending on how you view the point guards and RJ and Julius Randle. So I think it's a good fit for him. He's more of an attack closeouts guy, a catch and shoot guy, secondary pick and roll type of guy, where you're not relying on him to be your primary perimeter threat. So I do think he's a pretty good fit with what the Knicks are going to try to do. But yeah, I mean, I can see arguments for some of those other wings that were out there that you would prefer those guys, but I thought they got Fournier on what was a pretty market value contract where if you have to move him at some point, you can certainly move him.
Agreed. And of course, I mean, based on the fact that Fournier and RJ can speak French together, it's pretty important, I think. How many teams have starting wings who can speak French?
Well, you have to have at least one Frenchman on the Knicks at all times. I mean, of course. Yeah, you had to fill the quota.
Yeah, exactly. But speaking of RJ Barrett, player who speaks French, there's been much ado about kind of what RJ will be, what he could be. The fact that now there's more talent around him, does that benefit him, but does it also maybe hold him back in a certain way because there's only one basketball and RJ can certainly play off the ball, but we want to see him play more on the ball and excel because that's where a lot of his value is going to be. So I'm going to throw you a bit of a curveball instead of kind of what to project or expect from RJ. What would you identify as maybe being more of a disappointing season from RJ Barrett?
Ooh, that's a good question. I don't think he took the jump he needed to take as a guy that's going to create his own shot. And to me, that still ultimately is him being able to create high percentage looks for himself. Now, in the pick and roll, and if he gets downhill, in a straight line. He can get stuff going towards the basket, draw a foul, finish with his left hand. And I thought he did get a little more crafty around the rim last year, and that's why his at the rim percentage went up. All good things for him. But do I trust, give RJ Barrett the ball in an isolation situation with 15 seconds to go in a tie game at the end of the game? No, I don't trust him to do that. We saw him try to do that. I believe it was a Pacers game, and he got stripped by a power forward on a switch, if I recall that game properly. And that play sticks in my mind. And here's the thing with RJ for me. And this goes back to where I think he was maybe a little disappointing last year. I still think there is a athletic limitation with him. He's not explosive at the rim. If he has a runway on a fast break, yeah, he gets big power dunks and everything. But in these short areas, he's not explosive. And I don't think he's very twitchy side to side, which is why I think in those one-on-one situations, he has trouble getting that separation from the defender that you need, which is why we see him so often, Jeremy, trying to take layups into a defender's chest. He can't turn the corner, get his shoulder around, and get a clear path to the rim. Now, can you still be a more efficient offensive player without that elite athleticism? Yes, but it's very difficult. You have to become an elite pull-up shooter. We've seen progress. He's not there yet. You have to be really crafty at the rim, Euro steps, changing direction, little underhanded scoop shots, things like that to make up for that lack of elite athleticism. So that, for me, is still the ultimate question with RJ when you talk about his ceiling, whether or not he's ever going to be the guy that you can give the ball to and tell me, go get me a bucket, or if he's going to be, which I think is the best end game in my opinion for him, the Mr. Do Everything for a team. All right, you need to get a basket off movement. Great. You want to cut to the basket? Great. Catch and shoot a three. Awesome. Take advantage of a mismatch on a switch in the post. Great. Attack a closeout on a kick out. Awesome. Be a secondary or tertiary playmaker. Like to see him improve his passing a little bit. Great. Be a really good defensive player. You can match up on 2s, 3s, or 4s. Great. That to me is where he's going to wind up. I'm not sure unless, again, he completely hits on all these other areas offensively. He's going to be that guy where you can give the ball to a few times a game and say, just go get me a bucket.
I largely agree on all of your points. And I think the one great thing is with the two kind of main points being the pull-up shooting and finishing, especially maybe probably with the right hand as well, since he is left-hand dominant. Those are the two things that his trainer, Drew Hanlon, has said he's going to be working on this summer. This was maybe a couple months ago when he was interviewed saying this. So I think the nice thing with RJ is that it's never a question of whether he is willing to do it. If there's a limitation, it's just because maybe he's physically incapable of doing it, not he doesn't have the mental fortitude or the motivation to do that. So agreed. I think that's all that makes sense. And I did also, if we're talking about sort of end of game plays, I thought that like what they did when they ran in Miami, when they had Julius, I believe, as the decoy, and then they got the ball to RJ, and he was this close to finishing with his left hand, and it caught Miami by surprise. It just didn't convert. So, and
now, Jeremy, real quick on that play, the reason I think it worked too is that they gave him a runway, right? They let him pick up speed up top, and he had some separation from the defender when he started the play to pick up that speed to the basket. That's when he's at his best.
Absolutely, completely agree. So we've got RJ, we've got Fournier, Randall, Kemba Walker, and hopefully Mitchell Robinson. The Knicks got better. Of course, so did several other teams in the East. Do you see the enhanced competition as kind of reason for a projected regression? Do you feel that's kind of fair? I mean, obviously the Knicks were lights out from three for quite a long time. They defended the three really well, defended the rim well. Do you think it's fair to say that it's kind of a regression of sorts is coming their way, or it's simply just that, other teams got better, the Knicks also got better, so maybe there won't be this big regression coming to New York?
Do you mean regression just in terms of record or quality of play?
I mean, I think they go hand in hand, but let's say record at this case, I suppose.
I think the Knicks are a better team. I think they might have an identical or worse record simply because of the matchups. And I think the one thing nobody brings up with the regression, during that crazy winning streak they had, people need to look at what Derrick Rose's stats were during that stretch when he shot around 55% from three and I think 60% from the field, where that's just not going to happen again. The defense thing, I was a huge proponent earlier in the year of saying the 3-point percentage was going to come back down to earth. And guess what? It did. After that start where teams are shooting 31%, they shot 35% the rest of the year. That's real. But here's the good thing about that people don't realize. The Knicks defense, despite the fact that teams shot 4 to 5% better from three, the Knicks defense stayed good. So I think what you actually saw was the underlying parts of the defense actually improved as the season went along, which made that, return to, regression to the norm in terms of the 3-point shooting not matter. So I think the defense is going to be fine next year. I think you probably don't have as many good perimeter defensive players as you did last year. So maybe you see a little bit of a regression just from there. I think the rim protection is going to be good. I think Knicks will be fine defensively. Are they going to be number one in all those categories? No. Will they still be top 5 or 6? Yeah, I think they will be. So that to me is not a thing. I think the Derrick Rose thing's a problem. He's just not going to be that good for a long stretch as he was last year. I could see Randall not making quite as many extremely difficult contested 2-point shots and contested 3-point shots. And again, I'm not saying back to, David Fizdale Randall. I'm talking a happy medium between David Fizdale Randall and Tom Thibodeau Randall, right? Probably leaning more towards what he looked like with Thibodeau, but maybe not 42% from three, maybe 39% from three, right? Something like that. So still good, just not great. I think RJ's catch and shoot stuff is real. I do. I don't think that's going to get much worse. So, I could see the Knicks finishing, they were 10 games over 500. Would it shock me if they went 46-36 next year? No. But the problem is that 46-36 might get them the 7th seed or the 8th seed next year because the East is better. So if that's regression, then yes. But would it also shock me if they went 43 and, 38 or 39, whatever it would be, and they finish with the 9th seed? No, that wouldn't surprise me. And that's just a 2-win swing, which is the difference of what? 1 or 2 made baskets at the end of the game. Is that really regression? I guess, but that's just kind of the way basketball goes, right?
Absolutely. And I think also the one thing is if the Knicks don't perform as well, which I'm, again, like as you're saying, 10 games over 500, that's a really great feat, especially for a team that many were projecting to be towards the bottom of the league. I'm curious what the conversations will be in regards to Reggie Bullock, Elfrid Payton, any of the guys who are coming in, because there's going to be a drop off maybe a little bit defensively, sure, between Fournier and Bullock, but I think offensively the ability to create. And I thought Reggie Bullock, unless he's becoming the greatest shooter that we've seen in ages, and how his defense, it's good, but it's not like, oh my God, how did we lose this if you're New York? And that's the thing. If it stays consistent with Dallas, like I would imagine being on a poor defensive team, that's not exactly going to help Reggie Bullock, the defender, at least the perception of his defense. His offense, maybe, he's got a pretty great player next to him, and obviously in Kristaps Porzingis. So it's the sort of thing where he'll prosper in that way. But yeah, if so, you're saying 6th or 7th, right? Maybe based on where they're at.
Yeah, I would say somewhere between 6 and 8. I think that's probably where they're gonna fall. It'll be somewhere between 10 and 4 games over 500. I'd say somewhere in that area, give or take.
That's fair. Yeah. So if we're taking that, and you and I have talked about this before, because obviously the next step after the season is you need to try to get that star.
Yep.
So we've talked about privately LaVine and Beal, and publicly, of course, because those are the 2 stars, and we've just talked about on the podcast. So you are much more team LaVine than you are team Beal in this makeup of the team. Tell us why.
If you would have asked me before the Westbrook trade, it might have been the opposite, to be honest with you. Before this, if you'd have talked to me back in May, I would have thought Beal was much more likely, because I thought the Bulls had made some moves that were going to make him better, right? Vucevic I thought was a good move, but then I think they went off the rails a little bit this offseason. And here's the problem. Zach LaVine's not dumb. His agent's not dumb. If the Bulls don't become significantly better this year, and by significant, I mean like 4 or 5 seed good, and they're wallowing there, and again, wallowing maybe is a strong word, but if they're hanging out with the Knicks in the 7th, 8th spot, the Bulls have zero flexibility. They trade all their picks. They have no cap space. They can't add anybody. Zach LaVine's going to see that. Why would he sign up for 5 more years of that while he's sharing the ball with DeMar DeRozan, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? So I just think he's in a situation where he's going to get very unhappy very quickly. with what's going on there, which is why I've shifted more to LaVine. Meanwhile, I think the Wizards are going to be better. And I know all these NBA players say how much they love Russell Westbrook. I'm sorry, that dude can't be fun to play with. He just can't be. I don't care what anybody says. I've played with guys that play that way, obviously not to that level, but it's just not a fun game to be a part of, in my opinion. So the other thing about Beal too, do we really know he seems oddly loyal to Washington. I don't quite know why. He just is. I don't get that sense from Zach LaVine. So I just think there's a better chance that LaVine is the fit, just because the Bulls right now seem to be more incompetently run than Washington does, given that Westbrook trade and kind of what else they did this offseason, which is why I think LaVine right now is more likely. But would Beal surprise me if he, come February 1st, he's asking for a trade? No, it wouldn't. I just think LaVine, based on what the Bulls did this offseason and how they've set up, really, let's be honest, guys, set up their next 3 years. I mean, we know what the Bulls are now for 3 years. I just don't see how or why Zach LaVine would sign up for, hey, give me some more of that.
I agree. And I feel like, maybe DeMar DeRozan and Patrick Williams have one season where they overlap, where Patrick Williams starts to take that next step and DeMar DeRozan is still in his prime. And, you could package maybe Lonzo and Patrick Williams, but then what is that getting you? And you're depleting your team, and you have to add picks most likely, depending on the player. And they have 2 first-round picks, one they acquired in the Lowry and Markkanen sign and trade, and one by nature of the step-in rule that they're allowed to trade. But I guess the one thing I'm personally curious about with LaVine, and you could probably say this about Randall to an extent as well, as this was a weird season. It was, it's not like these players have never played basketball before and suddenly an open gym. I mean, we have years and years worth of data behind it. But I understand the concept of, shooting, if it's up, we know about the bubble and all of that. But the difference with me, I guess, in my thinking, is that Randall put his name on the dotted line and LaVine didn't. And I think that LaVine is still going to get a max contract because he just simply will, barring some sort of injury. And even then, I think the Bulls, they're all in. There's a desperation factor. But I guess my question to you is, from what you've seen with LaVine this past season, do you feel very confident that that is simply like a stepping stone and he's going to continue to get better or still play at that level? Or do you have any sort of hesitancy about, he's a great player, he's athletic. I think I saw recently that he hasn't won 4 games in a row since UCLA. Of course, basketball's a team sport. Like that sort of mindset. Does that factor in at all? Or are you kind of just like on the other direction? Is it somewhere in the middle? Or where are you at?
Yeah, because his offense was never a question for me, right? So, did he get better this year? Sure. But when I had hesitation of wanting to bring in Zach LaVine before this year, it wasn't because, I just don't think he's that efficient of an offensive player. It's the other stuff. And something that makes me a little more optimistic about him, I'm not sure if you heard Jeff Van Gundy on the Zach Lowe podcast. They talked a lot about the Olympic team, and he raved about Zach LaVine with the Olympic team. And he just said he was willing to take a side role, did all the things the coaching staff wanted him to. He was a really good soldier. And I wonder if he's hitting that maturity point now where he's understanding what it takes to win a little bit. And I think with a guy like LaVine, in a lot of ways, it was always kind of mental with him, right? Where you kind of have to figure out exactly how to balance me with team offense and defense and what it takes to win. And I wonder if his Olympic experience maybe helped with that a little bit. So I think he's figuring it out. Could the bubble have helped his ridiculous nearly 50, 40, 90 shooting year? Absolutely. But offense is never the issue with him. I don't know. And maybe you guys have a better feel for this too. I've kind of tried to find stuff. I haven't. What he feels about Thibodeau. They have experience together, obviously. I don't know what that relationship's like. But maybe if he's, spent time around Greg Popovich and those type of guys, he's like, all right, maybe I'm now ready to be coached hard. And that's a good fit for me. And I've seen how Thibodeau has taken players like me. And I think Randall and LaVine to some extent were similar, right? And where they were. Great numbers. People didn't know if they can translate those numbers to winning. So maybe he thinks Thibodeau can turn him into that type of guy. It's a good question. The good thing, though, is that we don't have to just decide on Zach LaVine based off the bubble season, right? We're going to have another sample size coming up here, whether it's the trade deadline or the full year, to get a better feel for it. So I think how he fits in with that roster will be interesting, and how much he's willing to share and try to make that team work rather than just trying to maximize his value too. So I think we are in a bit of a wait and see process for LaVine, but if I was asked right now, would I be willing to roll the dice on him on a max deal? My answer would be yes.
Absolutely fair. And I think the one thing with him and Tibbs is that, the season before Tibbs got there, LaVine was playing 82 games. Tibbs arrives. Of course, it's the ACL tear season, but I think critics could point to the fact that LaVine was playing 37 minutes a game. But to me, when I see that, it's like, again, you could tear your ACL very early on, like Spencer Dinwiddie. He tore his ACL and he was in the third game of the season and he really wasn't playing minutes. It's just the more you play, the more likely you are to be hurt. It's just the way it is, but it's not necessarily the reason for it. But I guess the point I'm getting to here is that the comments that LaVine made in the past, they were about how he appreciated that Tibbs trusted him and he was often the go-to player. And even though at the ACL tear and being traded to the Bulls, it was kind of just like, well, this is still someone who believes in me, who empowered me, made me a better player. And for that, I'm grateful. I'm paraphrasing. Is it lip service? Maybe. Who knows? He could just be really good with the media and whatnot. But I don't think it is. I think he legitimately felt like he gained something there. And I think that's important. So we shall see with Zach LaVine. But now I want to kind of transition more towards Giant season, football season, I guess. If you will.
Before we do that, can I throw one more thing in?
Please, yes.
I know Macri, and I read his newsletter. He's very high on Obi Toppin. I feel like he wouldn't trade Obi Toppin for the name your NBA All-Star. I don't get it. I gotta be honest with you. And I'm probably gonna make some Knicks fans mad here. I'm gonna ask you guys two questions. Mm-hmm. Can Obi Toppin consistently create his own shot and score?
I have trouble seeing it happening consistently. I think he can do it as like a fringe starter if Julius Randle's not here, but I don't think it's the sort of thing where that's his bread and butter by any stretch.
I agree. What level of defender would you consider Obi Toppin?
I think he was adequate enough. Yes. The high hips concern was there, but hit him well. And I think that's where I was a little more impressed just because my expectations were down here. And I was like, oh, he can hold his own at moments. That's fine.
I agree. So we're at adequate shot creator, or maybe slightly below adequate. We're at adequate defender. We are at, let's say, adequate 3-point shooter at this point. Adequate. He's okay. It's fine.
The spotting up's getting better.
Yeah, absolutely.
Especially from the corner.
And we're seeing improvement. All that's great. He's 24. He's an older rookie. So a guy that's adequate at three things and already 24 years old, Knicks fans, prepare yourselves. If there's a big trade for a star, that dude's the first guy in the list going out of town. And it's not Obi's fault. If he's in a different team with a different opportunity, without Julius Randle in front of him, maybe it could work. And by the way, my little secret thing, I think RJ Barrett can be a small ball 4 sometime soon. He's strong and can rebound the hell out of the ball. Where the heck is Obi? He's not playing center. You're not playing Randle at small forward. So what, you're not going to trade this guy to play 13 minutes a game? Because Randle's playing 35. Like Tom Thibodeau's still the coach, right? So it's not Obi's fault. It's not admitting he made a mistake. It's not saying Obi stinks. But it could not make more sense in the world for him to be the first guy on the train out when that trade happens. It's just the circumstance, and that's okay. It's not a bad thing. That's just the way it is. Had to say that piece. Thank you.
No, and I agree. And I think the funny thing as well about when you're saying it's not his fault, I had an instant flashback to Good Will Hunting, where it's like, it's not his fault. It's not his fault no matter what. And I completely agree. I think that's one of the things John Macri and I agree on a lot of things often. That's the one thing where I think we're very further apart, is that for the same reasons. It's like, because Randall's going to play and because we know that the Knicks are keeping him long term, they're not going to play Obi at the 4 and the 5. And I've said this on this podcast before, but I'll say it again. They just don't have the interest of playing Obi and Randall together for extended minutes. They like that 5 who's a rim protector. So basically you're looking at Obi and you're saying, like, this is someone where we're trying to maybe squeeze out productive minutes for maybe 16 minutes a game at most this year. Last year it was closer to 12, I think. And you're basically trying to look at, like, we can replace that talent. And you can. I mean, if you establish a way to get 3, 4, legitimate good guys, and I'm saying, like, from let's say, above average starter to elite player, hopefully even on the scale of 3 All-Stars, if you're able to do something, or RJ Barrett progresses, whatever it might be. That's where the salary filler comes from, is someone like Fournier, someone like Burke, someone like Noel, maybe even someone like Mitch, depending on what they want to do, but also Obi Toppin. And, again, like, you want someone who can be a 4 and play 16 minutes a game, you can find that relatively easy. I think it's mostly just that as Knicks fans, and because of the fact that we've seen so many players come and go, I mean, we're still talking about a Charlie Ward curse that's not going to end this year, and it's certainly not going to end next year. So assuming that RJ Barrett stays, then it's like, what, since 99? That's the first year, and it'll be 2023. So we're talking about 24 years, which, let's face it, is longer than some of our listeners have been alive. Not me. I am older than that, but for some of them. So the fact being there, where if there's just not an avenue for him to go, it's easy to surmise why he would be on the way out. So I appreciate you saying that. And
by the way, I appreciate and understand the sickness. I still want Frank Ntilikina back on this roster. I get it. I mean, sure. I get it.
Me too.
Yeah, I get it. So, but that, you know what though, and I've said this to John. John's who I go to talk to, have him on my podcast, The Bank Shot, or talk to him on the stuff you guys do for Knicks Film School when I need like that shot of Knicks optimism. And he always thinks the best of people. He thinks things are going to work out. And I'm the opposite. I don't know if it's just, the years on this planet. I'm very much a realist in that way, in that I'm kind of the prepare for the worst, hope for the best type of mentality. And John just always sees the sunny side of the street. And I love that, which is why I open his newsletter after a bad game. Sometimes I'm like, John's going to find that 3-minute period from Theo Pinson that's going to make him feel better on the day after a game. And sometimes you need that as a Knicks fan. You really do. So it's appreciated on this end. Let me just tell you that.
Perfect. And Macri, we love you. You'll be back soon. Okay, perfect. So moving on to football season. So there are several Knicks fans listening to this who are also Giants fans, such as myself. So I'll be honest. The question in front of me is, which team would you tell Giants and Knicks fans to be more excited about this coming season? But I'm actually going to pull an audible.
Oh, okay.
Football term there. I'm going to ask John, why should I care about the Giants this year? I say that as a Giants fan because I got to tell you, personally, I have shifted further and further away from football. It's kind of lost my interest over the years. Used to be I'd just sit in front of a TV every Sunday, watch for hours, and now it's a little less so. And, I'm sure David Gettleman is partially a reason for why that's the case. But because I've been following at a distance, what exactly should I be, or why should I be hopeful of the Giants, and what are some of the reasons for why that should be the case?
Well, this is a big crossroads season for them, to be honest with you. A lot of what they've done the last 3 or 4 years, you're going to figure out this year if it's working. The Saquon Barkley draft pick back from his injury. Daniel Jones heading into his 3rd year. All these young offensive linemen that they're putting out there. Andrew Thomas, 1st-round pick last year. Go back to Will Hernandez 4 years ago. Matt Parrott. Go down the list. You're going to see if these guys are really growing together. Throw in the free agent additions, the new guys, Kenny Golladay, Kadarius Toney, their pick this year. Is everything going to come together and work? And I think offensively, they're extremely young. They have a lot of guys that are learning to play together. In a lot of ways we've seen with the Knicks the last couple of years, right? They're kind of growing together. You hope they come together and they put it together. We'll see when the regular season comes if that happens. We don't know yet. And I think Daniel Jones has literally every physical tool you would want out of a quarterback. I did not think that when they drafted him. I've seen him on the practice field. He can make every throw. He's fast. He's a good kid. There's no reason not to want him to succeed. In a lot of ways, he approaches the game a lot like RJ Barrett does, right? He's that type of person, that type of leader. So for me, that's why Giant fans should be excited. And that's the stuff that you don't know about, right? I think you should feel pretty good about the defensive side of the ball. They bring back a lot of the same guys. Their defense was good last year. Patrick Graham, I think, will probably be a head coach in this league in 3 or 4 years, maybe sooner than that. So I think the defense is going to be really good. And you get to see if all these young pieces on the offense can come together, and some of the new guys too, to really give you something to have fun with. And I think this is The first time since 2017 going into a year, I felt really good that this team has a chance to really win the division. And I think they do. Certain things have to go right. They have to stay healthy, all those things that usually go into an NFL season, right? But they're just as talented as Washington. All around, I think they're just as talented as any other team in this division. Different teams with different strengths. But I do think if everything works out, and look, there's no guarantee that's going to happen, they have a chance to win this division if things go well this year.
Do you think that's more of a strength of the Giants' perspective or more of an indictment of the competition in the division?
Hey, look, I'm not going to lie to you. It's not a great division. A team last year made the playoffs under 500 and they won the division. So, you aren't rolling the Packers and the Ravens and the Browns and the Steelers and, look at the NFC West, go down the list. So, yes, it is as much of an opportunity as it is anything else. Like, you could argue that they have a better chance of winning the division than, say, getting a wild card. I think that is a legitimate conversation to have. So, yeah, certainly. When you break down a team's chances to make the playoffs in the NFL, you start the division. Half your schedule, or I shouldn't say half, 6 out of 17 games, so just over a third come in your division. So, yeah, that matters. So part of the division is definitely part of that calculation for sure.
Do you think, because from what I'm reading online and listening and whatnot,
if it's on the internet, like it has to be true.
Well, it's absolutely true. But it seems as though the offensive line, you called it young, which is accurate from what I know. In terms of kind of like the Daniel Jones versus the offensive line conversation, because this is Daniel Jones' third year.
Yep.
It's usually the third year is when you start to maybe see more improvement for these guys. Is it kind of like a chicken and egg situation? Because you need a good offensive line for your quarterback to be good, but your quarterback also has to be good on his own and the offensive line in that factor. Is there maybe one that's more fascinating than the other, especially because Saquon Barkley coming back from the torn ACL, he's going to need good blocking in front of him, find the paths. Where are we at with that?
I am very much of everything starts with an offense at the offensive line type of guy. You don't have to be great, but you need to be around average, right? Like you don't want to have the 29th best offensive line, but if you have the 20th best offensive line, all right, that's fine. It just needs to be good enough for your offense to function. And I think that's where we're at. The worst thing that could happen is that if you're staring at this and you get to the end of the year and you're still not sure about the quarterback because what was happening in front of him wasn't good enough to get a read on him, that to me is the worst possible thing that can happen. I don't think that's going to be the case until this final preseason game where Andrew Thomas had some issues at left tackle. I thought he was having a great summer and a great camp. Now, we're going to find out if that was because of the competition he was facing against and just the structure of practice, or if that's a bigger issue. We'll find out about that. But yes, I think in a lot of ways, you need that offensive line for Daniel Jones to function. And as you guys know, NFL, it's all about the quarterback, right? So unless you have the quarterback, you're not there yet. And the Giants need to figure out if they have the quarterback. And you hope to know at the end of this year if you do or you're not. And the play of the offensive line will certainly have something to do with that.
And now, I guess maybe to put more of a bow on it. So the Giants also have the Chicago Bears 2022 first round pick. Looking at their quarterback competition, because I mean, if you're a Giants fan, you want the Bears to go 0-17. You get of course pick in the draft. And then if that's the case, the Giants, if things go well, great. If things don't go well, we're back to tankathon, but on the NFL side of it. Looking at that battle, do you want Andy Dalton to start? Do you want Justin Fields to start if you're a Giants fan? Is there a really a huge difference between the two, since one is, I guess it's probably a below average starter, the other is a rookie?
Yeah, look, Justin Fields at some point is going to get in there, right? I mean, he just is, whether or not it happens early in the year or late in the year. And when you take a look at the schedule, the Bears' schedule to start the year is they have to start against the Rams, right? That is a really, really good defense. So if I'm Chicago, do I say, maybe do I not want to throw him out there against Aaron Donald? Yeah, I don't want to put my rookie. Look, if there's one thing about Justin Fields, he holds the ball a little bit too long. You don't want to do that against Aaron Donald. Then again, they play the Browns in week 3, and here comes Myles Garrett. So I think the Bears are going to start the year with Andy Dalton, and he'll probably last about 3 weeks. They'll probably start the season 1-2 or 2-2. To me, I think where you go is that if you're a Giant fan, I think the Bears are probably going to have a slow start to the year with the Rams, and the Browns will probably start the year 1-2. They get the Bengals in week 2. I don't really think it matters, to be honest with you, because Fields is going to find his way out there. I hate these people that scout quarterbacks on Twitter based on like a couple practice reps that some beat reporter puts on the internet, and they say, oh, look how good Justin Fields looks. Look at those 2 reps. It's fantastic. You can think about the NFL, guys. It's a lot more complicated than basketball. Someone that covers both of them. There's so much involved in these NFL games. I could sit there and watch a whole practice and think a guy did great. I talked to a coach after practice, and he tells me, that guy had a terrible practice, because you don't know what they're supposed to do on each play. It's a much tougher thing to do. So, look, root for the Bears to lose games, but who starts the season, I don't think it really matters. How good Justin Fields is when he eventually plays, I think that's what kind of counts.
Well, it's going to be hard for me. I'm conflicted, because on one hand, I personally want the Bears to lose, but Andy Dalton is a proud member of the Ginger community, and we have to stand our own. So, but that's
he's not just a member. He's like one of your leaders, I feel like, right? He's got to be.
He has to be. Yes. I mean, I don't know how many other redheaded athletes there are. Clint Frazier is currently in concussion protocol.
Sam Darnold.
Is he really a redhead? I thought he was more like a Cali blonde surfer type guy.
I think Darnold's a redhead, right? I think Sam Darnold has red hair.
Better question. Do I want to accept Sam Darnold as a redhead? Because he's very good looking, but I don't know. That's just Herder, unfortunately. See, like, this is the thing. I'm glad I have Clint Frazier on my team, but having to deal with Kevin Herder as well, that's tough.
After this season, do you really want Clint Frazier on your team, though? It has not gone well for him this year.
Again, that's another thing. I recognize that he's not the best option long term, but the hair color, that's all it is. So, John, in terms of, we do this every 5 to 6 months or so. We basically look at the teams in the New York area and kind of map out who's closest to a championship, furthest away. So if we had to kind of start from closest to the championship, listing the rest, I think it's pretty obvious that at the top, closest to the championship, probably the Mets. Second, maybe the Jets. I would hate to be a fan of either of those teams, especially if I were a producer for this podcast. It'd be pretty rough. But in actuality,
where do you rank on the Ginger list, Jeremy?
On yours, clearly very low, but that's okay. I'll take it. Safe to say the Nets, number 1 team in terms of championship contention.
Yeah, I think so. And I think the Yankees have to be second, right? As much as they frustrated people this year, if they get hot at the right time with all those hitters, they can make a run. The problem is that they can just easily go cold and get knocked out in the first round of the playoffs. That's kind of been the Yankee experience for the past, 18 or so years since, they went away from, since that first, World Series team kind of split up because guys got old. So, yeah, I think that's 1, 2. It has to be. After that, closest to a title, I mean, I wouldn't consider anybody after that close to a title, would you? Where you think they're going to contend this year? I don't know anything about hockey, so you'll have to explain that to me.
I was going to say, I think the Islanders are probably a safe third, and I say this as a very big Rangers fan, just based on the fact that when you get to 2 conference championships, 2 years in a row.
Oh, see, I had no idea that happened. Yep. So I agree with you. That's great.
But why would you? Yeah, exactly. Good for you, Islanders fans.
Yes.
So that's our top 3. And then, really what we've got are, in some order, football, Giants and Jets, baseball, Mets, hockey, Rangers and Devils, and then basketball, the Knicks. So it's tough, but I know, again, hockey's not the thing, but
I think the next 2 teams is some combination of Giants, Knicks, right? I think the Jets have a ways to go here just because we don't know what Zach Wilson is yet. We haven't seen him play. I think he's going to be a good player, but we don't know yet. And I think they're still a couple years of building away. And I think, they got those extra picks with Jamal Adams. Sure, I think they're in good shape to do that. They're just a couple years away, I think. I think the question you have to ask yourself, do you feel better about the young guys on the Giants becoming that Super Bowl contending team, or do you feel better about the unknown for the Knicks, which is who are they going to be able to obtain, right? So it's like, do you like the unknown or do you like the known? And you go from there, because I think that's kind of where you're at with those 2 teams. Could you put another team ahead of the Giants and Knicks at this point? I don't think you could, right?
I really don't think I could. The Rangers, they haven't really solved any of their problems. I don't know if you know Jack Eichel up in Buffalo. He's a great player. He's been injured, but he wants to be traded because Buffalo has been a mess of a hockey franchise for ages. If he came to New York, maybe it's a little different. But I'm with you. I think that I probably lean more, and maybe it's just because I'm a Knicks fan more than Giants fan, but what you're saying, the trust in that front office and how we know about getting a star or multiple stars, the path you can do it, versus on the other side of the ball. I mean, sure, the Knicks didn't make the playoffs for 8 years, but the Giants are entering year 5 of the Gettleman era. And every year it seems the offense is going to improve because he keeps picking first round talent. That is on the offensive side of the ball. It doesn't seem to get better. So I think you have to go Knicks Giants there, and then maybe Rangers. And then it's really just Mets, Jets, and Devils in some order.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the Knicks are farther along too, right? I mean, the Knicks were the 4 seed last year. Say what you want about the East and the bubble and, and the crowd and all that stuff. They were still the 4 seed. The Giants have not been in that playoff situation since 2016. So they're certainly farther along. I agree with that. I think that's fair. Baseball's weird. Baseball teams can kind of turn around on a dime. You get a couple prospect come up, things like that. You spend some money in free agency. I just feel like there's so much variation for baseball teams year to year. I'd probably put the Mets next just for that reason, because you can see things change for a baseball team quickly. I think if you're going for upside, you go Jets, but I think there's a lot of unknown there. But I think just based on probability, I think Mets would probably be next in that mix, in my opinion.
I think it's fair. I mean, DeGrom is the best pitcher on earth. And, here's the thing. Like,
I've seen a bad elbow, but that's okay.
Yes.
Sorry, Andrew.
Well, Andrew's probably going to boo us if he didn't have his hands in his face or his faces.
Oh, dear. And by the way, not for nothing, I didn't know Norse gods could get COVID. When did that start? Built-in immunity, no?
Vaccinated North gods.
Yeah. This is why, if I can amend your lists a little bit, today is not the day to ask me about the Mets and where they should rank. They're
none of
dead
that,
last.
No? Thumbs down?
They're very much on the way down, John. Okay? That's the worst part about this list, is that you're right about baseball, and that, realistically, the Mets have time to make a run. They probably, on paper, have the talent to make a run this season in a division that's been pretty mediocre all year. What we've seen over the last month is that the rot is in the walls. There is not much going well over at Citi Field, to the point where the players have apparently been booing the fans whenever they've done something well over the last month. And the manager, the general manager, the team president knew nothing about it. And the only reason we didn't pick up on it sooner is they only do it when something good happens. And over the last month, nothing good has happened.
Well, it's the opposite, right? The Yankees had the thumbs down thing when they did good things a few years ago.
Put them a win away from the World Series. Yeah.
Dude, what is Javi Baez doing? I mean,
I don't get it.
Dude, the first rule when you're advising a player about this stuff, and I haven't worked PR, but I've been around enough people that have, you do not turn on your customer base. Nope. you know who you don't annoy? The people that are buying tickets to what you do. Never a good plan, ever. Period.
That's
no.
It would be like if all of a sudden, we decided to make fun of all our Patreon customers.
Yes,
just be like,
not
see,
a good idea.
You know what? We're gonna now give you a thumbs down every time you listen to one of our episodes. No, it's just bad. It's not even just a bad baseball thing. It's like a bad business thing.
Put it this way. You know what happened to me if I opened up one of my Giants podcasts and started killing our season ticket holders?
Yes,
I'd be out of a job. Bye, John.
Which probably tells you what's gonna happen to Javi Baez soon.
Yes, probably.
Which only makes that trade look even worse, because you trade for an impending free agent to kind of right the ship and make the playoffs. The Mets were in first place, right, when the trade was done. Mm-hmm. And now you're talking about a Mets team that's going to finish in third. Most of their wins in the month of August have come from against the Nationals. Mm-hmm. And Baez probably leaves because if you're re-signing him, you're basically just hoping that the fan base forgives. But again, he's batting just above 200 for his Mets stretch. You can't boo the fans, especially if you're doing that.
Well, guys, Lindor's worst. They've committed to that dude.
Yeah, because it's a 10-year commitment. It makes it. I will say, he had a bad month and a half to start the year where he hit literally nothing. Had Javi Baez's contact rate the first month and a half, and then started to round out to more of his career averages, and defensively, he's still been great. So
again, I don't mean he's worse as a player. I just mean the fact that he is turning on the fans after committing to him for 10 years.
He's gone in 2 months. Not our problem anymore. No. Yes. So the Mets are last is where we're going with this. Just appease me. The Mets need to be
for
last.
You.
Yes. Thank you. Can I jump in real quick with one suggestion for the list? Because you had it interchangeable. The Giants and Knicks could be 4 or 5. I have a theory, and having a Giants employee on, I don't know if you can comment on this or not, but I'll ask and you go either way.
Sure.
So, there's a quarterback in Green Bay that's going to spend his final season in Green Bay this year. The Last Dance. The Last Dance, as they've campaigned it as throughout the national media. The Giants, if they show this year that they're a quarterback away, what's to say that after Tom Brady just went to Tampa Bay, why can't the Giants quarterback next year be Aaron Rodgers? And if the defense is as good as it was last year and the Giants are only a quarterback away, why can't the Giants be the next closest to a title because Aaron Rodgers is going to be their quarterback next year?
Here's the thing. Aaron Rodgers wants to be on the West Coast. He gave all those teams he wanted to get traded to. I don't think any of them were Central Time Zone or Eastward, to be honest with you. So I have no idea what the Giants are thinking.
It was Denver, Las Vegas, right?
Denver's the other one that would...
Seattle maybe was on the list, I think.
Yeah. I just think a coast is more what they want. Is they want a bigger city like LA or a bigger city like New York. I think if you told Shailene Woodley you get to live in, Dumbo for all of football season, I think you'll be fine.
Hey, look, Aaron Rodgers is fantastic. So you never know. But the Giants, I will tell you this 1,000%. The Giants believe Daniel Jones is the guy.
Okay.
They believe it. We're going to find out this year how right they are.
Then they're 5. Then they're number 5 because I don't. Yeah.
Fair enough. John, before we get you out of here.
Yeah.
Andrew has a fascinating opinion on the Giants, specifically on one player.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, no, you got Andrew.
I'm going
to let you
no, you're
introduce.
Gonna get me in trouble.
I'm going to get Andrew in trouble because this is the plan now.
Okay.
Andrew, why don't you tell our friend John here?
All right,
what the situation?
I got no
is.
shame. Okay, let's do this. So the caveat I will give is that I feel I've been misunderstood with this opinion, John, and I don't look when I am evaluating a player's Hall of Fame resume. I don't like to look at small sample sizes, especially when team accomplishments get brought into play. I like to look at the whole thing. Like Kevin Durant, if you're going to say, oh, he lost in the playoffs, he's a loser. It's like, well, we're talking about the matter of an inch and he hits one of the biggest game-winning shots of all time. That's not an accurate depiction of his contribution to his team. We need to look at a bigger sample size. So when the Hall of Fame comes around for one, Eli Manning, my hero, by the way, the reason that the Patriots didn't have an undefeated season, by all my friends in college that were Patriots fans that continued to give me crap, were like, had to shut up and eat all of my crow because you lost to Eli? That's the quarterback that ended your season?
He's the Brady stopper, baby.
Bingo. He's going, and I acknowledge he's going to make the Hall of Fame. I just tend to look at the 8 quarters of the Giants defense completely shutting down one of the best offenses I've ever seen. And I put that more toward the reason why the Giants won, but you can't give an entire defensive line Super Bowl MVP. So when I hear, of course, Eli's a Hall of Famer, he won 2 Super Bowls and 2 Super Bowl MVPs. That's not a good enough argument. I look at his larger sample size where the career has some compiled yards and stuff. He's in the top 10 on some lists, which I get, but Matt Ryan's going to pass him in yards this year. I don't think Matt Ryan's a Hall of Famer.
Right.
So all that to say, CP and I have more gone back and forth on this, that Eli Manning is not a Hall of Famer when you really look at him take away the 2 Super Bowls. And he's like, the argument is the 2 Super Bowls.
No, I know. I think both of you guys are right?
Okay.
I think if you take away the 2 Super Bowls, I think then sure. And I understand the argument. Do you put a guy in the Hall of Fame based on the shoulders of 8 games, right? Because it's not fair to just say the 2 Super Bowls. They had to get there.
Right.
And one year they had to win 3 games on the road to get there. And the other game they win 2 games on the road, one against a 15-1 Green Bay team in Green Bay, and then a 14-2 49er team or 13-3 in San Francisco.
Mm-hmm.
So they beat some really good teams on the way to those 2 Super Bowls. Now, the first one, I think Eli was kind of more along for the ride, right? The Giants defense was fantastic in 2007, and Eli did what we need to do. If you look at his playoff numbers, I think he had 1 turnover in 4 games that year.
In the Super Bowl, too, yeah.
Correct. And then you look at 2011, when you get a second, even throughout the entire season, look at Eli Manning's fourth quarter stats in 2011. He almost threw 20 touchdowns just in fourth quarters. It was one of the most clutch seasons you've ever seen. And in the playoffs, he did the same thing. I think he had 1 turnover in 4 games, and he played extremely well. Eli does not have your classic look at the numbers over a long period of time, compare him. Oh, he's in because of the whole totality of what he did. He's going to get in because when they played in big games, that's when he played his best football. He's almost like has the bit of a Derek Jeter effect, right? Where you look at the regular season numbers, they don't like blow you away, but against the better teams in the most important moments, he played his best football. And I do think that counts. Availability, guy never got hurt, played in every game. That counts. That counts for something. And then just throw in the fact that the 2 Super Bowl championships, it's such a hard thing to do. And you look at the greatness of that 2011 season on its own, which I think if you look at it is kind of an MVP caliber season overall, by far the best season of his career. I think in totality, all that puts him in. But I do understand the argument where you say, all right, well, why am I just counting 8 games more than the other 200 that he played? I don't understand that. Why would you do that? But that's how sports, I think, works. For the more mathematically inclined, I get the argument, but I'm biased. I love that dude. Like, he's just the best. Like, he's just like, there's nothing phony about that guy. What he is he is. And he was always, I've never seen somebody not let anything get to him like that guy. Like he's the dog in the meme with the fire around him and he's sipping a cup of coffee just, man, I don't know. It's fine. It'll be okay. And you trust him in those spots. You just do. Even in 2016, when the Giants had that really good team, they made the playoffs, played the Packers in the first round, right? Eli Manning lit them up that game. His receivers dropped 3 passes. 2 for touchdowns. They should have won that playoff game because he was great in the playoffs again. So that's why he's in for me, but I do get where you're coming from on your argument.
It's very much just has Hall of Fame moments, didn't have a Hall of Fame career. Like the highs are
get
high.
The argument. Yep.
That's all my and look, if he did it in green, I would absolutely be as passionate about the other side. Probably if he did it for my team. So Giant fans, please leave me alone. You just heard a voice of the Giants say he understands my side of things.
Don't agree with it, mind you.
Don't agree with it. I know, but it's the things of you're stupid. You don't know what a good quarterback looks like. How's Mark Sanchez doing these days? That's the thing I have to. So because I know what mediocre looks like and I see it happening on the Giants, I'm not allowed to make an opinion. So
well, I would say this. I think to define his career as mediocre.
No.
I think it's a little strong too. Yes.
It's more just that's my response is what I usually.
I got you.
When Giant fans throw that at me, he has Hall of Fame moments, which is something Mark Sanchez has none of, and I'm acknowledging Mark Sanchez might be the best quarterback I've ever watched play for my football team. So, which is I know a sad statement. Please, Zach Wilson, be the guy, but. Anyway.
Vinny Testaverde, man, come on. He had a great year.
For a season.
99.
For a season.
Yep,
and then, week 1, down goes Vinny, down goes the Achilles, and what was supposed to be our year goes out the window, Now
are you telling me there isn't nuanced argument on Twitter? I mean, that's
I know, right?
To me, man, right?
we have to make absolutes. It's either you're wrong or you're right. You can't look at full context when it comes to arguing.
Right.
What do you know? Anyway, thank you, Jeremy, for putting me on the spot there. I appreciate that.
Just light him up, Colin. I like it. Light him up.
Yes.
Have to. And also, Eli Manning goes to Milburn Deli, so he's Hall of Fame in my mind. It's a great place to be. So kudos to him. And again, I've seen 2 throws of Zach Wilson's. So John, I know how much that it gets you excited about how I, casual fan, watch 2 throws of Zach Wilson. Not impressed. I think guys
not impressed.
might be a bust just based on what I saw.
As we wrap up, John, do you have a take on Zach Wilson? Am I in good hands finally?
It's funny. I do so much draft work every year. Like I literally try to watch 150 players heading into each draft, and I have like 4 months to do it. But I knew the Giants weren't picking a quarterback this year. I did not watch any of the quarterbacks heading into this year's draft because for me to do a fair evaluation of a quarterback, I think that's like 2 or 3 days worth of work. Because I don't like to just put on some highlights and say, I think this guy's pretty good. I really want to watch like 3 or 4 full games, watch all his third down passes, like all that sort of stuff. And I decided I'd rather watch like 30 other guys than try to watch like the 6 quarterbacks just because it wasn't Giant centric. But talking to people that have done the work on him, I've heard some good things. I'll leave it at that. I think you should feel pretty good about it. Then again, I love Sam Darnold. I thought he was I did do a lot of work on him. He was my favorite quarterback in that class. I think your organization did him a great disservice the last few years. I hope he does really well in Carolina. So you could take my opinion with a grain of salt because I thought he was going to be fantastic.
Oh, that's what's going to happen. He's going to go to Carolina, be a top 5 MVP candidate. They'll make the playoffs. And Wilson will, be on a 6 and I hate that there's 17 games. A 6-11.
It's weird.
That's the record, right?
It's weird. Okay. I'm not going to get used to that. It's a big problem.
So what I've tried to trick my brain into doing is March Madness is like it's now the seeds. So it's 115 to 116 to 15.
Ooh, that's a good trick. I like that's a really good trick actually.
Like it takes a minute to get used to it, but now so if we have 5 wins, it's 5-12, 4-13,
8-9. Yeah, dude, that's good. Oh, I'm going to totally use that trick. That's really good.
That's on the house. There you go.
No, Andrew redeeming himself after
I know, right?
Take 5 minutes ago. Wonderful.
There we go.
Well, John, thank you so much for stopping by. I really appreciate the conversation. Had a great time. The floor is yours. Anything you'd like to plug? Tell the people. I mean, they know from the beginning of the pod where they can find you, but tell them again.
Yeah, guys, Giants Podcast Network. Check it out. Giants mobile app, giants.com/podcast. All of your favorite podcast platforms. We have our daily live show, Big Blue Kickoff Live. We take calls for an hour every day talking Giants. Giants Huddle Podcast is kind of our interview podcast. We just launched a special 10th anniversary podcast called the All In NYG Podcast, celebrating the 10th anniversary of Super Bowl 46. Our first episode was literally an hour conversation with Eli Manning and Justin Tuck, no host. Just those 2 guys talking for an hour. It's pretty awesome. We have another episode dropping the week this upcoming week before Labor Day. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say what episode it is, but there's a bunch of big guys that'll be talking to each other. That's a large group of players. I think you can kind of figure it out from there. It's a lot of fun. I listened to the raw audio. There's going to be a lot of editing there to make it good for air, but it's a lot of fun. It's very entertaining. Make sure you guys check that out. And then, of course, for Knicks fans out there, The Bank Shot. You can find it on Odyssey.com, WFAN.com. I'm on a bit of a hiatus right now. I'm taking about 2 weeks off as we get ready for the NFL season. Knicks will probably be quiet. Do you guys know when does camp open? Do we know that, by the way, yet, guys? Do we know when camp opens for the Knicks?
Is October 6th, Jeremy? I think it is. And then preseason's like October 10th. Both of those numbers are probably wrong.
Well, it's probably they might start in September. Honestly, I haven't even really checked.
Neither have I. So So we're taking a few weeks off is the bottom line. Yeah. We'll be back at sometime near the end of September, but make sure you guys check out the archive. We've had some good guests on, and just appreciate you guys do great work over there at Film School. You guys really do. You do a real service to Knicks fans. Keep up the good work. Tell Macri to unpack those boxes, man. I mean, his kids are looking for their toys. They're sitting there. They're disappointed. Tell him to get to work, man. I mean, come on. He's got to clean those boxes out quicker. I know it's tough work, but geez, come on, Macri.
John Macri, the magic is in the work. Get those boxes unpacked, man.
There you go.
Well done.
Thank you. John Schmeelk, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you, guys.